but there's always, every day we can get Ross Dellenger on the show. It's great from SI.com, but obviously after the story in the Big Ten, what ESPN's decided not to do or what, and Ross joins us as college football's landscape churns every single day. Ross, what does the story about ESPN out of the Big Ten mean to the Big 12 or the Pac-12 or maybe even anything to do with Notre Dame?
Well, I think it probably does have far-reaching implications and impacts on virtually, from every corner of college sports. You mentioned three of them there: Big 12 and NBC, Pac-12. The Pac-12 deal comes open first, and in fact, the negotiating window, I think, with ESPN for the Pac-12 ended last week. I believe maybe they've extended it. Either way, they're the next ones up in the media rights kind of negotiating, and so you would think for the Pac-12 and for the Big 12 as well, their deal comes open in a couple of years, that this is ideal. That ESPN will now have 27 every year now, 27 more open slots to fill that the Big Ten had filled, and they'll have a lot more money to dole out. So there are certainly more opportunities there for those conferences who have deals coming open in the next year or two. And then Notre Dame is an interesting one. Obviously, ESPN's supposed to be part of the Big Ten's new deal, and that you could look at that two ways. You could look at that and think, well, if ESPN's paying X amount, or if NBC's paying X amount for the Big Ten, then maybe that doesn't leave them much money to negotiate with Notre Dame, and negotiate up, because you would think Notre Dame will try to renegotiate their deal with NBC, given the market reset, all this money. But you can look at it another way, in that NBC knows what to ask for now, and that Notre Dame knows what to ask for from NBC. And NBC is invested in college football, So I don't know. It's going to be interesting to see how all this kind of plays out. But I would say, if you're the Pac-12 and maybe the Big 12 and any conference whose deals coming open, this was good for you if you want to be a partner with ESPN.
Do you think that the Big Ten TV deal would still leave the door open, or now that they might know the money that they're getting, it might leave the door open for them to say, okay, now that we know what we're getting, Oregon, Stanford, Washington, whoever, they decide could opt or could be back in the water for them?
You never say never in this world. I don't expect that to happen. I don't expect the Big Ten to expand again in the near future, but I didn't expect them to expand this past summer either, and I didn't necessarily expect the SEC to expand last summer. So these things are really hard to predict, but most of the signs point to the Big Ten, at least for now. And I'm not talking about 2 years from now or 4 years from now, but right now, in the coming months, to be done with expansion. But there'll be a clause there always is a clause in these TV deals, these media rights deals that consider, a growing membership. So there'll be a clause, just like in the SEC's deal, that gives a pro rata share to anybody new if the conference expands. So it's always a possibility to get, you can get more money if you expand, and we all know it's about money these days. So, I don't expect it immediately, but do I expect it eventually? Probably so.
Ross, is there anyone other than Notre Dame that could join the Big Ten that would make a difference financially for them?
No, I don't. Not. I will say that there might be one or two ACC teams that maybe would add value. But they're, as we all know, right, they're stuck kind of in a grain of rights that probably at one point will be challenged because it's 14 years. They're locked in for 14 years. So I don't think they're going to go 14 years being locked in this deal without some team or teams challenging the deal. And that'll be interesting to watch. So if you don't include SEC teams and don't include ACC teams because of the grant of rights, and you're looking at just everybody else, I don't think there's any other team from the Pac-12, Big 12, Group of Five, or the other independents, except for Notre Dame, that adds value. Is you don't want to take a team that decreases the financial, the revenue distribution that you give to your schools. And Greg Sankey actually was on Dan Patrick's show this morning and said that, asked about expansion. He said you don't want to take away, you don't want to diminish the revenue to your programs by adding schools. It's not about quantity necessarily as it is about the quality they add and the finances and revenue they add. And I think Notre Dame is probably the only viable option for the Big Ten to actually add value. And that's why I think they sit right now only having taken the two, USC and UCLA.
And again, if you're Notre Dame, why would you change a thing about your life? You have a direct path. You run your own thing. You get to tell other conferences your thoughts, and you don't have to share that input with other schools. It seems to me that they wouldn't do that unless the rules change.
Well, yeah. I mean, I think they wouldn't do it maybe unless the rules change, or the CFP expansion doesn't give them access. Think about it, there's probably two reasons why Notre Dame would join a conference. One would be because as an independent, they don't have good enough access to a playoff. Or two, they it financially. And right now their deal with NBC is fine, but it pales in comparison to what some of these Big Ten schools are going to get. And that's why I'm sure they're going to renegotiate their deal in some way with NBC. Probably even maybe put an ultimatum in there, right? Renegotiate our deal or we're joining the Big Ten. You could kind of see that maybe happening. But we all have to keep in mind, too, Notre Dame still would owe the ACC an exit fee. And all of Notre Dame's sports outside of football are in a grant of rights locked in for 14 years in the ACC. So there's still that pickle as well.
Ross, you had a tweet from earlier today about 11 o'clock about the Big Ten and how they are putting together this schedule with what they have now with Fox, CBS, NBC, whatever they end up doing, and mirroring what the NFL has done. Why would somebody have not done that prior to this year?
Yeah, great question, because I think it's actually what they're doing seems, as a few people I've talked to today have described it, as pretty brilliant. The taking the NFL approach of distributing their games across multiple networks, not just one, not just two, but three very big networks, Fox, CBS, and NBC. And they'll have the three windows and three different, time slots in three different networks. It's pretty cool. They'd have their number one game would be the big noon kickoff. Their number two game would be on 3:30 p.m. on CBS. And then probably their third best game, and sometimes their second best game, would be the primetime game on NBC, and would be led into by a Notre Dame game. So it makes a lot of sense to kind of spread it out and have multiple media partners. It's funny because it's something the Pac-12 has talked an awful lot about. George Kliavkoff, their commissioner, and lo and behold, it's kind of the rival conference that took his members and also is doing the media, holding the media strategy, media rights strategy that he kind of has talked about quite a bit. And we see Kevin Warren doing that. It's an interesting way to do it. And then they'll have streaming too, which I think most believe that Amazon and or Peacock will be involved in the streaming in the Big Ten.
Yeah, Peacock would make a lot of sense. I guess Paramount would also make a lot of sense instead of 3:30.
Peacock is NBC.
And Paramount is CBS. Yeah.
And Mike George, by the way, mentioned that earlier in a text to us as well. I don't know if we said it backwards or not, but I thought I know Peacock's the NBC.
Yeah, so those would both make a lot of sense as to who your partner would be, even if you didn't decide to bring in Amazon. But that's the piece that I think a lot of people are confused about or waiting to see is how much the streamers like Amazon and probably to a lesser extent on college football, Apple, really dip their toes in the water when it comes to college sports.
Yeah, absolutely. That's I was talking to somebody in the Big Ten and said, man, how do you feel about having ESPN, cut out? I asked him that and he said, Ross, how much do you have ESPN on your TV outside of live sports? And I said never. It used to be so different, right? The answer to that question even 5-7 years ago was so different. SportsCenter used to sit on my TV, but not with the internet and with streaming and stuff. It just doesn't happen as much anymore. And so I think there's more comfort in ESPN being cut out and going, as you're talking about, more to streaming. And having that be a bigger part of your package in your TV package. And I think we're going to see that in a lot of places. We're moving into an era. It's the media. It's funny. The media rights kind of TV era right now that we're in is kind of comparable to the college sports era we're in. College sports is moving out of amateurism more toward professionalized, and media rights is moving out of linear and more towards streaming, and we're kind of caught in the middle. College sports isn't completely professionalized yet, but we're getting there. We're on the way there, and streaming or media rights isn't fully streaming yet. But boy, it feels like we're going to get there, and it might be really soon.
Ross, thanks for your time. We appreciate it. Ross Dellenger, SI.com with us, covers college football, Sikkim 365 Radio and 365 Sports. When we come back, Bader's Director of Athletics